Last time on Skoolie Life, I paddled the Colorado River in a kayak. Then I loaded up the next morning, went back to Moab to pick up my motorcycle parts, and spent the day fixing my motorcycle clutch. That was exciting. Once I finished repairing my motorcycle, I loaded it up with some supplies for a few days and headed back up to Potash. From my camp on Potash Road, I made my third and final attempt to circle the White Rim Trail. And if you've never been, it's exceptional. It's not really that difficult. It's just the size, the immense dimensions of this trail, taking you across some of the most beautiful landscapes I've ever seen in my life. So this is attempt number 3 at White Rim Trail. It's the trail that runs along the Colorado through Canyonlands, and there's nothing really tricky about it. It's just last year I failed to bring enough water and allow enough time. 2 weeks back it was broken clutch, and this time I've got plenty of water. I should have plenty of time. I don't know how difficult the other side of the trail will be. I've only gotten maybe a third, halfway, so I don't really have any idea. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get back. I'm not even sure about my route getting back. I think I'm going to come through the park and then come down the Schaefer switchbacks, but I got plenty of gas, I got plenty of water, I should have plenty of daylight, although the sun's going down earlier. I've got warm enough gear to get me back here even if it's freezing, so I don't see anything that's holding me back today other than will. But I've got plenty of that too. I got coffee, I'm powered up, I've got human fuel on board. I don't see any other thing that's going to hold me back today, so hopefully I'll get through it. Like I said, it's no big deal. I mean, it's just one of those accomplishments like Magruder. Magruder was awesome, and it was rugged, but there was nothing really tricky about it. You know, it's a 4-wheel drive trail. There's no 3-foot steps. There's nothing to jump. There's no death-defying vertical crawls. There's nothing like that, and I don't expect anything like that out here either. Just got to pay attention and hope nothing breaks, and hopefully I'll have something to report this evening. Even though I made a concentrated effort to keep my pace, a steady pace, and limit the amount of exploring and photography and all those things, it still surprised me how long I was actually down in the canyon. 6 hours. So I think that's something to take into consideration. Not just that, you're gonna have some issues in here. so small issues or large, you got to take all those things into consideration time wise. I did see a couple of tents in the canyon during my pass, so I know that there's people camping in here. I'm going to assume that it's completely legal, but I'm quite sure you would have to have a permit. And if you're on an adventure bike or your dual sport can carry a tent, I would highly recommend camping down in here. Not just for the experience of camping in this wonderful canyon, but splitting this up into 2 days would be ideal. But you need a permit to get down in the canyon. You need a permit to camp, most likely. They do have vault toilets. They have several. I would say maybe 6, 8. So I'm assuming that they would require you to camp in those spots where the vault toilets are, or pretty close, because I don't think they like human poo. So I'm almost an hour down White Rim, and I don't think I've been this far before, because I think I would have stopped and take a gawk at this. This is actually part of the road. And obviously we're hanging off a cliff here. I don't think I've ever seen this before. This is this is quite impressive. And the funny thing is that I wanted to get close to the edge, but I got off the bike and started taking off my gear, and I forgot I was standing. I don't think I got that close, but I got about halfway to the edge, backing up. Halfway to that edge from the bike, backing up, and then I'm like, oh shit. That was interesting. Man, this is just so spectacular. It blows Grand Canyon, in my opinion, just blows Grand Canyon away, because you can't ride along the rim of the Grand Canyon, or at least I haven't found it. I haven't found that part. So, in my opinion, this is 10 times better than the Grand Canyon. And, you know, it's the Colorado River. It's deep freaking canyons. It may not be as deep or as old or whatever, but where can you do this at the Grand Canyon? I'm going to try to find out. I'm going to try to go back down on the North Rim and do some more exploring. This time get the bike out. I didn't get the bike out last time because it's so freaking cold. Man, it was cold. So I really want to give everybody an idea of what to expect if anyone wants to cross the White Rim. I'm running at a pretty good pace here, probably 60 plus, and this is really the exception. I would guess that probably less than 10% of the trail you can run these kind of speeds. So with that in mind, you're going to have to keep a decent pace to be able to cross the White Rim between sun up and sundown. I guess it depends a lot on time of year too. This was November, but this is actually a more appropriate and typical pace here that I'm riding. But you can also see that the landscapes are much more interesting. So not only the trail requires a little bit more attention, but the landscape, I feel, deserves the attention just as much. So that's what I tended to concentrate on sections like this, where I'm crawling up out of the Colorado Canyon up onto the plateau. You got to really pay attention here. So, you know, running 45, 50, 60 up this thing is possible, just not sure if you want to do it, especially this is my first time up this section. So but you can hear my excitement as get higher and higher on these switchbacks here. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about some geology, because I'm fascinated by how the earth was formed, the natural forces that formed the earth and made the rocks. And here's a pretty good example of stuff I've been passing most of the day on the west side of the canyon. If you take a close look at this, you can see that there's probably only one thing that'll make a formation like this. If you've ever been to the beach, you would have seen ripples like this in the sand. And obviously that's what we got here, is an ancient beach. And if you look at this layer right here, you can see the same thing in reverse. Not near as good, but I've just kind of always ever since I heard the explanation, petrified sand dunes. I've always had a problem with the petrified sand dunes. I don't know why, because it was always hard for me to imagine how you get a petrified sand dune. You've got to have some kind of deposition on top of sand dunes, and that was the hard thing for me to imagine. But my my little tour through, my little Unimog tour through Hell's Revenge the other day, the driver, the tour guide, mentioned that the dinosaur tracks that you were looking at were preserved in place, in situ, by an eruption, an ash layer separating the layers. And I started thinking about that. I mean, that was a small flat piece of rock where the dinosaur prints he showed us were. But I started thinking, well, that would be enough to, a good thick layer on top of sand dunes would be enough to separate one layer of sand from the other and preserve it, potentially. So I started thinking maybe that's actually how it happened with the sand dunes. But here's another pretty good example. I was hoping to maybe find some plant life or some kind of a fossil, like a shell, or I don't know, fish. I don't know if this is the appropriate layer for fish. It's just cool to think about how the rocks were formed, and imagine years ago walking on a beach. To this day, it still amazes me how extraordinary this place really is. I mean, this is a national park, and from my experience, national parks are these pristine little sidewalks with handrails that don't allow you to do anything except stay on the path, stay on the designated trail. And here I am riding through this rugged canyon just below Canyonlands National Park. And it just kind of blows my mind, because this is such a rare thing, being able to ride your motorcycle around such spectacles like this. It was just so breathtaking. I think that zapped so much of my energy every time I rode out here. It's not real physical riding. It's basically Jeep trails in a canyon, some up and down. You have to pay attention, but I think the thing that really took my energy more than anything else is just the fact that my breath was being taken from me with views like this. This is not a breakdown, but it could have been a disaster, because I lost one of the mounting bolts for the top case. Lucky for me, Mr. Prepared has another nut and another washer that I actually tucked in. I probably would have forgotten they were there had I not gone through the case and sorted out some tools. So lucky me, I've got everything I need if I can just get it bolted back in. It's kind of in a tight spot. As I descended down into the Green River Canyon on the Green River side of the park, I noticed the road became much more rutted out. Looked like it had had much more rainfall, or at least more drainage on this side, and it became a bit more tricky. Most of the road was dry except for a few puddles like this, but hardened clay that's been rutted out is extremely tricky. If you're not paying attention, you can get yourself hurt, just because it tends to act like a railroad track, and once you're in a rut, if you try to go a direction other than what the rut is, if your knobbies fail you getting out of the rut, you're going to go down. So that's the tricky part of this side, at least. A little bit more rugged, a little bit more rocky, but the ruts definitely should get your attention on this side. A little bit more high clearance issues on this side. I also had a buddy reach out in one of the comments recently, talking about his trip last year. After 3 days of rain, it sounded like they really struggled. Hopefully I can see his video eventually of the struggle. Not that I'm that much into struggling, but I do like challenges, and I'm not a big fan of mud. So luckily for me, it wasn't raining when I went out there, so it was a pretty exciting trip. And this side of the canyon is just as spectacular as the Colorado Canyon side. So I did go a little bit slower because you could see the sun's going down here, and I usually make 3 or 4 times as many mistakes when I'm tired, when the sun's going down. So I was quite aware of the issues, the potential issues ahead. I really didn't have any real struggles on this side, other than just trying to pay attention and be aware that this is the time I'm most likely going to fall off the side of a cliff or dump my bike into some crater or trench or something like that. So I was really paying attention more so on this side, but it was also a nice surprise to get up beside the river right here. It seemed like almost a sheer cliff on this shelf road that's running alongside the river. Just makes me wonder how old this road was. Is it 100 years old? Is it 150 years old? Did miners make this road? This was just a real treat riding alongside the Green River here, and makes me also wonder if this was ever a railroad bed. See a lot of these around the south, at least, running alongside the rivers, just because it was easier apparently to run the rail bed alongside the river. But I was also getting a little bit anxious to get out of the canyon because the sun's going down, and I don't like riding that much at night anymore, mostly because of the animals, but I knew I was going to have to not only get out of this canyon successfully, but ride back pavement a pretty good ways. I think it ended up being 15-20 miles circuit, and once I actually got out of the canyon, didn't ride back through the park. I just rode a big long gravel road up to the top of the plateau or the mesa, back down into Moab. There was another shorter route into Moab, but it's kind of tricky, and the sun was pretty much gone when I climbed out of the canyon, so I decided rather than make the tricky route back to the camp, and would take the quickest, fastest route. I could do 70, 80 on this bike. Here I am going back up the switchbacks. Nowhere near as spectacular as Schaefer on the other side, but still very nice, and just incredible climbing out of this canyon and taking one last deep breath as I came back up and saw the sun as it's going down. And then after this, it's just a bunch of long, fast dirt roads back to the pavement and back to Moab, and then back to camp. But still, just such a breathtaking day.